Okay, we're going to switch right over here. I'm going to be talking about a book, and I have the picture right here, but she's got one in her hand as well. Julie, I want to say that right. I want to say Julia because we were just talking about that earlier. But Julie is an author, and you were an author because of your brother. So let's talk a little bit about what caused you to write this book.
Oh my. Well, I'd been, I was so influenced by my brother. He shaped my life so much. And then one day...
You were just a little girl in 1964.
Well, no, I was 17.
Well, you're young.
So It was young.
Yeah.
It was young. Anyway, since early childhood, he and I were very, very close. And then one day, when I was walking home from my library that's just up the street from me, I realized that my grandchildren would never know him because he's died. And I wanted them to understand who he was. And the only way that would happen is if I told them the story. So I started with the idea that I was going to write something for the family, and I started writing childhood memories, early childhood, realizing that I would need to write about his time in Mississippi with Freedom Summer 1964.
This is Meridian. He was basically in Meridian.
Yes, and I, of course, was not present then. And I knew it would not be my childhood voice that would tell that story. I would need to do quite a bit of research in order to tell. And I started work on it actually in 2014. I went to Mississippi.
Oh, you went
for
there?
For Mississippi Freedom Summer at 50. So the 50th
you actually
anniversary.
Got the feel for the area.
Yes, yes. And I had not expected to meet his former Freedom School students, and I did. And while I was there, I was at a soul food restaurant having lunch with the Thompson sisters. Came to understand.
And they're on the show today, so we're going to be talking with them.
Andressa and Dorothy, who are here with me, actually are two of the 7 sisters and live in Albany, close to where I live.
So you
we
saw
became
them
friends.
in Mississippi, but they lived in Albany? How does that work?
Isn't that wild?
It's like the stars all came into alignment, right? I mean, it couldn't have happened otherwise, right?
That's right. So I realized I would have to write in a different voice, and I had started writing for the grandchildren in their late teens, early 20s, thinking of them. And then one day, I was writing, and I thought, this is a larger story. It's not just for the grandchildren. It's not just for the family.
It's historical.
This is historical. It's a very important story to tell. And so I ripped the whole thing apart and started over with a different audience in mind, who wouldn't know him.
Yeah.
So I would have to paint the whole picture of the family.
Well, let's paint that picture, and then we're going to be talking with Dorothy and Andressa here.
Yeah.
They're sitting over here. But let's talk about your family, because your parents, although they were liberal and they were, they understood what was going on, how did they feel about your brother saying, hey, I think I'm going to go to Meridian, Mississippi, and I'm going to be a freedom writer, and I'm going to start a freedom school? And they said, what?
They totally freaked out. So my brother was a medical student at Stanford, and he had finished his 3rd year. He was about to take his board exams. He had applied to volunteer. Stanford had a 5-year program which allowed students to do extra research or pursue special interests. And so they actually encouraged students to do things like volunteer for Mississippi. And my parents freaked out. He wrote a letter home on a napkin. He was in a restaurant.
I think that's in your book, isn't
and
it?
it starts the book.
Yeah.
It starts the book. So
you
his
want to read that?
handwriting,
Can you read that letter?
I'll read just part of it. I'm in a restaurant without paper and feel like writing, so I shall use napkins and hope that you can read what I write. Dear family, I'm through with finals and did well on all of them, including genetics. Tomorrow I'll spend the day with Alex, that's our sister, and then it will be 2 weeks of preparation for boards. And he goes on to talk about that. Then he says, I am going to Mississippi. You want reasons why, so I'll give you a few. I wrote in my application for SNCC, that's the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, that I wanted Negroes to have equal opportunities. This is the obvious reason that anybody works for civil rights, because the Negroes have been cruelly deprived of their rights. The state of Mississippi has neglected its responsibility to its Negro citizens, and therefore it is necessary for outsiders to remind them that the rest of the nation is concerned and won't stand for any more subjugation of the Negroes. So he used the old language, right?
Yeah, because that's not used anymore. It's either black with a capital B.
Right, right. And so the new language hadn't occurred yet.
Yeah.
And then I write, as the beginning of the first chapter, A Test of Family Values is the title. Luke's letter, scribbled on a napkin, was postmarked June 1st, 1964. Our parents had been forewarned about his plans, but it didn't seem to matter. My oldest brother Luke had told them when he was applying to volunteer for the Mississippi Summer Project, but they went nuts anyway. They were flooded by fear. He wrote, I recognize the possibility of danger in Mississippi, but I really have confidence that no physical harm will be done to me. I have talked with many individuals in the civil rights movement, Negroes and whites who are working in Mississippi. They are alive and healthy, and so I shall be healthy too. And so they phoned him, and my father insisted that he fly home from California, from Stanford, to Rhode Island, where we lived, in the hopes that they could persuade him not to go. And my parents enlisted me in that effort.
At 17?
At 17, and of course, I didn't want to tell my brother not to go, and if he told me he was going to be safe, I believed him.
Well, you mentioned safe. We do know about what James Chaney and what is it, Andrew Goodman and Michael Schwerner.
Michael Schwerner.
And they were, the three of them, of course you that are watching the show might remember that these were three freedom riders that went down there, and they were kind of delayed in one town, and then they had to drive to another town, and actually it was the sheriff that alerted the KKK, and the three boys were murdered. Was that before or after?
So he was home in Rhode Island, and that was June 21st. It was reported on the 22nd that they had disappeared.
Yeah.
There was no evidence.
They must have gone to Puerto Rico for a vacation.
Right. That's what the governor of Mississippi was saying. It's all a hoax, of course, but my parents really freaked out, and
so this was before he went.
This was before he went.
So even though he said, "I will not be harmed,"
right?
This comes up.
This comes up, and then not only does this come up, but James Silver, a historian who was teaching in Mississippi, said on the television, "Don't come to Mississippi. If you do, you're going to be murdered. It's too dangerous." So my mother shrieked, but my brother was not to be dissuaded. And at the orientation where he went, they did everything they could to discourage the volunteers. Because they didn't want people to go.
They didn't want anybody to be hurt.
Right. And of course, the whole effort was nonviolent, and so you went through this training to learn how to handle yourself and not fight back if somebody was beating on you or spitting on you, or a mob, which my brother faced later, was happening. And then, of course, he was assigned to Meridian, which was the city where Mickey Schwerner and James Chaney had been working.
Right.
And then he was writing in his diary, "Ooh, Meridian, not Meridian." What will my parents think of that?
I mean, it's got to be alarming.
Yeah, it was very, very frightening.
So he went there and he taught biology.
He taught in the Freedom School. Every Freedom School teacher, so the effort basically for Freedom Summer was voter registration.
And they had the Mississippi Democratic.
So they started a new party, and because it was so dangerous to register to vote, only 6.4% of African Americans were registered, because you could lose your home, you could lose your job, you could lose your life. Exactly. And so what SNCC and the other organizations involved, the civil rights organizations, did was to create a new party, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And when they went out to register voters, some might go to the county courthouse to actually try to register with the Mississippi Democratic Party, but many more would sign on to this new party. So the main thing was to register voters and to show that blacks really did want to vote, but they were being prevented.
They were being,
But then in addition, they planned the Freedom Schools, which never had been done before. And so when Luke went, every teacher had to teach citizenship, had to teach something about black literature, so that the students would learn about their heritage and about civics and what it means to be a citizen. And the whole idea was to develop future leaders.
And voters.
And voters. But what he was most excited about, because he was involved with science and medicine, was to teach biology.
And now we're going to go over and talk to the Thompson sisters. And with me, I have Andressa Coleman, and you were a student.
Yes.
You have to hold your mic a little bit closer. Yeah.
Yes, I was.
You were a student, and your sister Dorothy Singletary was too young to do that. So
But she was a student as well, but she was in the younger group.
She was in the younger group, so she did not have Luke as a teacher.
She did.
Tell me what your experiences were with Luke
Well, my experience with Luke is that the first time I saw him, I was a little bit leery, because in Mississippi, you knew your place and you didn't mingle with the white people.
So that had to be really different for you.
It was. It was really different, and it was kind of mind-boggling, too, that we would actually be socializing with the white people when...
Were you afraid at all of the white people there, or because you knew that they were there to help you, did you feel any... Because there had to be some fear from some whites when you know that there was a lot of bad things going on.
Right, it was a little uncomfortable in the beginning.
Okay.
But if we went in numbers, like none of us went alone, we went in numbers. And when we heard about the Freedom School, there's this guy that was there, name was Roscoe Jones, told us about the Freedom School.
Was he black or white?
He was a black guy,
Okay.
and he was a friend of ours, and he told us about the Freedom School. And I'm thinking, we're going to go to school. School is just getting out.
I don't want to go to school in the summer.
And he said that this is different. Let's go see what it's about. So we go down, and there's all these white people there. And I had all my sisters and my sisters with me.
And you have eight of you, right?
7 girls, 2 boys.
2 boys, okay.
And my sisters were younger, so I was kind of like in charge of them. So I took them down with Roscoe and went down to see what it was about. And the first person, white person that I spoke with and had a conversation with was Luke. And he was saying, "Oh, I'm glad you came down." And I'm kind of looking around trying to see why. Are you glad that I came down?
Now you're suspicious. You're a little suspicious.
Right. So in a little while, we got to know him. He was a little quieter, laid back, but he would write. He was always writing. And I was always peeking, trying to see what he was writing. And
so
my
you still were a little bit distrustful in the
beginning.
beginning.
I was a little leery of what he was writing.
Yeah.
And the kids were around, and then he would let them read. And one day he wrote something. In fact, what he wrote on your napkin, he let me look at it. And he's just writing to his mom. That's okay. So after that, it was good. it turned out to be pretty good. And going to school in the summer was really nice. It was educational, and it was interesting, and it was really intriguing to be socializing with the white people when we weren't used to that in Mississippi.
Yeah, and there was really a true segregation.
Yes,
is that what you say?
definitely.
And you tell a story about school, about how they had to let you out at a different time, so the bus. Tell us about
Yes, the Meridian High School children would get out at 3:30, and we would get out at 3:30 from Harris High School and Carver School.
Were the schools segregated?
Oh, yes,
Okay.
definitely.
I'm just.
So we would get, the kids that rode the bus would get off the bus, and they would most of the time get off on the same bus stop. And it was always a fight, always something. And if we didn't start it, if they started it, we got the brunt of it.
Of course.
So then they changed. They let the white kids out at 3:15 and let us out at 3:30.
Okay.
So we had to stay there a little 15 minutes longer.
Yeah.
But my sisters and I wasn't really involved in that bus stop stuff because we walked to and from
So
school.
you didn't have to deal with that.
No, we just kind of
But it's
about it.
interesting that there was that issue as far as the buses even.
Yes.
I mean, it was really interesting. Can we bring Dorothy in here for a moment? Oh, come on, Dorothy. She said Dorothy is a very shy woman. She's afraid to talk, but I'm going to make her talk today.
Make me talk.
Yes. Now, you were not in Luke's class.
I was in the
You were in the
Younger,
school.
younger.
Did he teach you as well? No.
yes.
Oh, he did, okay.
I was 13, 14, I think.
Okay.
And really, I was with the younger group, and we didn't want to play. We didn't want to play, and Luke played along with us. He would ride us on his shoulders and put us on his back, and we would love that. We were tomboys, and
Amazing.
and we just loved because
It's something that you would never even have imagined.
exactly, yeah. And he was like a little kid with us. I mean, he played with us, and we loved that. And I think that's how he pulls us in with the trusting with him.
And how were the other, and now we're talking about Luke, but there were other teachers there. Did you feel the same way about the other teachers?
Well, yeah, yes and no, yes. Some of them, I mean, I would never want to, like, just go and trust right away. But like I said,
you have
Luke
to be
was different.
suspicious.
Yeah, Luke was different. I don't know, he was just a different person.
He taught through play.
He would play with us, and we love that. And we gained trust with that. The rest of them was like, okay, let's do this, you know. Like, I don't know you, and I don't trust you that much. But
Now, I know that when we talked at Siena College here, I don't know whether it was you or Dorothy, and perhaps one of you can tell the story, about a little black boy who kind of got lost, and he went to somebody's house, knocked on the door, and said, "Can I get some help?" Is that it? Was that you telling the story? Why don't you let her finish? Because to me, Andressa, this story struck my heart when you told it. That anybody, well, I'm going to let you tell the story.
Okay, it was a little boy that lived across the street from us. And his mom had two kids, a little boy and a little girl. His name was Johnny, if I'm not mistaken. He was maybe 12, 13, somewhere in there. And he went away from his home. He wound up in a white neighborhood, which we weren't supposed to be. And he knocked on the door and asked the lady, could he have some water or something? And she gave him water, then she gave him food. And she put him out of her house. And a few blocks from her house, he died. He had been poisoned. So she gave him poisoned food, and it poisoned the kid. And nobody knew what happened to him. And after they found him and they did whatever, that was it. You know anything else about it.
Well, because nobody was going to press charges,
Exactly,
right?
no,
Because
no.
your voices didn't matter.
Right.
Right?
It didn't, no.
Yeah. And you were there when the three boys were murdered, right?
Right.
And I know the stories come out that, oh yeah, no, we don't, when the coroner checked them, they said, when they found him under all that concrete, and where did they find him?
They found him in a shallow grave, like almost like in a swamp, and it was like muddy. And the vehicle had been burned. They burnt that out, and I think they found them like in a swampy area or something like that, from what I hear. And that was
And they said that the cause of death was unknown.
right for a long
And they
time.
had been beaten to death.
Yes. Yeah. And I think some of them had been. I think they, if I'm not mistaken, I think they set the car on fire
Yeah.
before the guys got out.
Yeah.
Because when they had the service and whatever, they just didn't open it
Yeah.
or anything like that.
How did the black community feel about that?
They were
I
horrified.
mean, they were all white boys, right?
right. Oh, we were.
Two whites and
Two
one.
of them,
Okay,
Jane, Mickey and.
you can chime in. You're on a mic too. Yeah.
Sorry, Mickey and Andy were the white guys. James Cheney was the black guy.
Okay.
He was our neighbor, and we knew him quite well. And they were saying that they disappeared. They don't know where they are. Maybe
was
they're
a
coming
hoax.
back.
It was a hoax.
Yeah, and saying that we got these agitators down here, and they just hooked up with the agitators and hiding someplace to get some attention and all that. And it was like, that's all. They just brushed it off like it was nothing.
But did the black community realize what was going on?
Yes, we knew what was going on.
Yeah.
But it was just like we had no proof, and we couldn't really say anything about it to the authorities or anything. But among
I
ourselves,
think the FBI ended up coming
well, the
down.
FBI did come down there, and in my opinion, when the FBI came down, they said they was going to help out and do this and do that. And I saw this movie once called Mississippi Burning.
Oh, I saw that.
Now,
movie.
the way they portrayed those FBI guys about coming down to help this, help that, that was not true. That was not true at all. Because, in my opinion, they were like hostile and,
And they were white.
yeah, it was kind of mean and hostile to us, you know.
Yeah.
And they would go through the neighborhood asking questions, and it was like, well, what do you know about it? Did you know this, or did you see this,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever?
Well-
it was like really, really.
So yeah. Well, it just makes sense that you would tell that story because that's how they were at that time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Al-
So
also-
I was going to go back to Julie here. I'm sorry.
Also, you know, what happened was on the 22nd, when they announced that the young men had disappeared, President Johnson, LBJ, ordered the FBI to investigate. And J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI, announced that, yes, they would investigate, but there would be no protection for the civil rights workers.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. He was friendly with segregationists.
Oh yeah.
And so that was it. On the other hand, Meridian may have been a bit safer that summer after
Because the eyes were on them.
because the eyes were on them. Right.
Yeah. Now, let's go back to Luke because
Yeah.
we kind of got the whole story about his experience there. And Luke went down there, and what happened? Did he, after that summer, did he say, sayonara, I'm gone, or what?
All right. So let me back up just a little.
Sure.
Because the picture, the photo on the cover, is
And we had that picture up
is
there, I
the
think.
march that was to the funeral of James Cheney.
Oh, okay, I don't think
So
I
let
have
me
that
tell
one.
you just briefly that the parents of Mickey, Andy, and James wanted their bodies to be buried together. They had died together.
Oh,
And they had
I did
been
not know.
shot.
I was not aware of that.
So, yeah, they were murdered.
Yeah, I know.
Right,
No,
and
no I
so-
mean, I didn't know about burying them together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that, of course, was not allowed. There was segregation in every department of
that's
life.
right. One of them was
right?
black. Oh, what was I
Okay.
thinking?
So the family of James Cheney planned a private funeral. Now, Luke was interested and becoming more and more interested in adolescent and social psychiatry. And he realized that the community needed to grieve. It wasn't just the family. And so he and his very close friend, Gail Falk, who was
Yeah,
also a
you
Freedom
mentioned.
School
Major
teacher
character.
and a major character in the book, they proposed the idea that there would be a march to the church from different directions, and they were given
Oh, and they would meet,
permission
yeah.
to lead, to plan this with a committee and to lead the march. And then outdoors, there was a community service for James Chaney, which was incredibly important and meaningful.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a place where my brother was really important, and here he is just on one of the marches from one of the directions, leading the march with Reverend Culpepper. And of course, my brother was always writing, and I
That's
was
what they were
very
saying.
lucky, very lucky to get all of his writing. So anyway, when he went back, to refer to your question, when he went back north, he missed Mississippi. He was writing back and forth, letters to his friends there because some of the volunteers, like Gail, had stayed on. Mm-hmm. And the first opportunity he got, there was a clinical rotation in November, and the school gave him permission to go back to Meridian. So he was in Meridian again.
As a clinical?
Instead of a
clinical, okay.
Right. And so he went back to teach Freedom School, but this time he could also participate in protests. And they went out, the volunteers went out frequently every day with teenagers to test the Civil Rights Bill. Would they be served if they appeared together at a restaurant? And so then there was a mob. He was arrested several times. There were white cells for white women, for white men, for black men, black women, right? So he and his friend Free Cocroft, were in cells with segregationists. And they actually were in jail, accused of contributing to the delinquency of minors.
Oh,
When the FBI...
they were stretching, weren't they?
Yeah, yes. Well, Socrates was accused of that too.
Yes.
So anyway, the FBI had identified, because they had gotten a tip from two who ratted on their peers, they arrested and charged the murderers. Those who were from Meridian, the bulk of them, were brought to the same jail where Luke and Free were in the cell, and they heard that these murderers were being brought to the same prison, and of course they were terrified. Would they?
Were they white murderers?
Yeah, of course they were.
Yeah, okay.
They were part of the Ku Klux Klan.
Okay, yeah.
I'm
assuming. I wanted to make sure I wouldn't got the right.
Would they be brought to the same cell?
Yeah, and that would be pretty terrifying.
Yes. So the whole summer.
Isn't it amazing that the Ku Klux Klan still has a voice?
Yes. Yes, and now we have White Lives Matter, and we have other hate groups as well.
There's so many hate groups out there.
So many, and around...
The white supremacists, the Proud Boys. I mean, I could go on all day.
Yes, and it's around our area that this is happening too. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
It's terrifying.
Well, it's funny. I talked to a man. He came to a wedding, at my granddaughter's wedding, and he was from Texas. He had been involved with the adoption. So anyways, but it was funny because I thought, oh, Texas, here we go. And I sat next to him, and we just kind of chatted lightly. And then he said, I was driving. I said, where are you staying? And he said, some small town. And I said, oh, yeah, we were driving. And he says, yeah, we passed a Confederate flag. He says, I guess they're everywhere. And I go, oh, thank goodness. He says, I didn't know they'd be up here too. And I said, yeah. And that's when I asked him about, what was it, the Sundowner town? Sundowner?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
The black codes.
He said, I remember those in Texas.
Oh.
The Sundowner. Do you know what the Sundowners?
No, I'm not.
Okay,
so
do you know what
much
the
about
Sundowners?
it.
Yes. Mississippi changed its laws
You probably
all
know,
along.
but you don't remember the name.
So in 1860, Lincoln was elected. Mississippi, when they seceded from the Union, said it's all about slavery.
Yeah.
They were very clear about that.
Oh, no, I thought it was the
Okay.
economics.
Yeah, right. Then,
Wink, wink.
yeah,
Nudge,
right,
nudge.
right. Well, it was about who can pick
Yeah.
So anyway, then there were the black codes that were passed when there was the emancipation. Well, no, when they lost the war, they passed the black codes, and the main feature was a vagrancy law. They could
That's called a sundowners, right? Yeah.
they could arrest and detain any freed person they wanted to on trumped-up charges. They could imprison them, and then began the convict lease system where they would lease them out for labor, which was slavery under a different name.
Yeah.
And the sundowner
The sundowner was that if
the
you
curfew
were
was-
found in a town, and that's why a number of the blacks that were traveling had to know where those towns were so that they wouldn't be in that town after sundown.
Exactly.
Because then anything could happen to them.
Right. And of
And
course
that's
there
what
weren't
this man from Texas
hotels
told me, yeah.
available, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was, I mean, and then you think about the new Jim Crow and the incarceration of
Yeah, yeah.
African
It's just
Americans
so-
today and the huge numbers.
The balance is like,
It's part of the same
yeah,
system.
it's an illness that we still have in this country, and it's getting worse. And I don't know if it's getting worse. Maybe it's always been that way, but we're looking at anti-Semitism. We're looking at the Muslim or the Islamophobia. We're looking at a lot of things where I believe that it's okay to hate.
Yes.
Right, and hatred has been given
A
a
voice.
a voice in a way that it didn't have before.
We didn't have before.
So-
And maybe it was there, but people were at least realized this isn't a good thing, so I'm not going to,
Right.
continue with it. But now it's okay to wave that, the loser flag and stuff like that.
That's right. And so I'm hoping that my book will inspire people. My brother's
where can they get
writing
the book?
is really beautiful.
It's a wonderful book.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful book.
Thank you.
And when I spoke with these three ladies before, and Paul Murray, who has been instrumental in helping to promote, he gives the courses on
Civil rights.
yeah, at Siena College. It's so important, I think, at this day and age that we realize, and even though that we have some governors in the country that thinks we shouldn't be talking about, the Holocaust and not be talking about Black history because I don't know why.
Because somebody might be uncomfortable.
Oh, was that the
offended.
reason?
That's
They
the
might
reason.
be uncomfortable. Well, heavens to Betsy, we wouldn't want anybody to feel uncomfortable.
Right.
You never felt uncomfortable, did you?
Oh, of course not.
Oh my. Can I read just
Sure,
a tiny
go right
bit?
ahead. We have about 2 more minutes, so go right ahead.
So, so Gail Falk, his friend, wrote, "These children," when she was reflecting afterwards, after the summer, "these children will not grow up like their parents. Freedom songs have been their nursery rhymes. For their parents, freedom still means danger and bombings and beatings. For the children we knew, freedom is beginning to mean friends and new ideas and being brave enough to start to dream about and choose the life they want to lead when they grow up, and learning to make these dreams come true. They are already, as one of the Freedom School students said, free in the mind. And is this not a lot closer to the meaning of that word, which none of us really understands?"
Okay, and
So,
let's,
how to get it?
yes.
It is available on Amazon, but I'm hoping people would go to the local independent
independent.
bookstores. The
I do
Stuyvesant
wanna-
Plaza bookstore in Albany
Yeah,
is
go right ahead.
carrying it.
Yeah.
And you can go to the University Press of Mississippi, and they would be happy to send you another book. And right at the moment, they're having a sale, so the books are on
Yeah, it's
sale
it's
for
an important
half
book, but
price.
before we end, real quickly, your brother died.
Yes.
But he did not die because of this movement. So just quickly.
Okay,
we
he
have 1
died
minute.
2 years, just 2 years after Freedom Summer in 1966 of a very aggressive case of cancer. And it was a shock. complete shock.
Imagine what he'd be doing today.
I know.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
You had an inspirational brother.
I
and
did.
look what he's created, maybe not because of his death, but because of what he did in Meridian and how he's affected Andressa and Dorothy and many other children that were there at the same time.
Yes.
To at least allow you to realize there are other whites in the world.
Yes.
I want to thank you all for being here, and congratulations for writing this book and making a statement and carrying on your brother's legacy as well.